Hey everybody, I'm InstructorY. I'm the instructor for your HS 150 course, and as we go through here, I'm going to try my hand at making some video for you, because I think some of the material that we're going to cover as we go through the chapters might be a little easier to grasp if you can get a visual, and if I can help you through that visual. That's the goal of these videos. So what I wanted to cover, I know this is just a little bit late on chapters 1 and 2, and I apologize for that. However, I'm not very technologically savvy, and it's kind of taken me this long to figure out how to get this done for you. So hopefully, if you had any trouble with the concepts that we're going to talk about, this will help you get a little clearer picture of what's going on, and as you move through, when you need to know the information later on in the chapter for the final, it will help make it a little clearer for you if you had trouble. Also, it's really important that you get these key concepts down early on, because they do come into play as we move through the semester, the quarter. And in addition to that, they're important principles that you really will need to know, and you'll apply and use as you get out into the workforce. And that if you're a personal trainer or a strength coach, or even a massage therapist, understanding planes of motion and how that changes how muscles are functioning is going to be useful to you when you're trying to help someone through an injury, or figure out how to treat them to help them recover. So there's that. The first one I want to talk about is this concept of planes and axes, which I think it seemed like most people did pretty well through the assignments on this, but just to make sure we're clear, if you did have some trouble. First of all, let's talk about what a plane is. A plane is basically an imaginary two-dimensional surface that a limb or a segment is going to move through. And we can talk about the plane of motion with respect to the entire body, or with respect to one particular joint. And I'll show you on Mr. Stan Skeleton here, and I apologize, I'm not really sure where to look on this camera, so it's not that I'm trying to talk past you. But I'm not sure where to look. So at any rate, Stan here, if we use him as an example, and he doesn't move too great, he is not the most expensive skeleton in the world, but he serves the purpose that I need him for, so that's good, which is to study where things are. So at any rate, if we talk about the planes of motion, we're talking about 3 cardinal planes primarily. Most of our motion, or a lot of our motion in the way that we move about every day, doesn't occur just in one plane. Typically it's a combination thereof, but we want to talk about just 3 cardinal planes, just to keep it simple here. And when we start talking about it, we're talking about it from an anatomical position. Stan, if he's facing you forward, if he were lying on a table, Stan would lie in anatomical position, palms up, arms in neutral, and so forth. So the first thing that we want to talk about are what are these 3 cardinal planes. We have frontal, we have sagittal, and we have transverse. Okay. Now the frontal plane, it's kind of easier to remember, I think, than some of the rest sometimes, because basically if I drew an imaginary line right down the center of Stan here from the side, it would divide him in front to back halves. And the thing to remember about that imaginary line is it extends on forever. I almost picture like a really thin wall, if you will, I guess, that would go on straight through here forever. And if I moved Stan, side bent him, okay, so if he could move, tip this way, tip that way, he would be moving in that frontal plane. If we look at the shoulder joint in particular, the glenohumeral joint, and we cut this joint straight in half, front to back, and divide it into the frontal plane, this motion right here is going to occur in the frontal plane. Okay, this the actual abduction motion of the glenohumeral joint. Okay, in terms of sagittal plane is going to cut us in half, side to side. So S for sagittal, side to side. Okay. Again, if we think about this as a thin, imaginary, two-dimensional plane or space, like surface that goes out, okay, continuously. If I stand bowed, he stands out capable of bowing, has a very stiff steel rod running all the way up his spine. But if he were capable of bending forward and taking a bow, he would be bowing in the sagittal plane. because he would be following that line up and back. Okay. Again, if we look at the shoulder joint and we divide it side to side, okay, and we bring the arm up, the shoulder up into flexion, okay, then we would be moving again in the sagittal plane. Okay, and it's the plane that you're moving in that you're really trying to look at here. Okay, we'll talk about axes in a moment. Transverse plane, I think T for transverse, top and bottom. So if we cut Stan in half, look at his top half and his bottom half, and if we could rotate him to look over to his right, he would be moving then in the transverse plane. He would be rotating in that plane. Okay, so he would be following the same line as the plane goes. All right. So each plane then has an axis associated with it about which the limb or the segment moves. The important thing to remember about the axis is it's always going to have this perpendicular relationship to the plane. Okay, or I think that sometimes like a 90-degree relationship to the plane. So if we go back to our frontal plane and we look at the glenohumeral joint, okay, here's our frontal plane motion again. This is our glenohumeral joint. And if it's dividing us in half front to back this way, okay, and we're moving this way, then that means if we have a perpendicular relationship for our axis, or a 90-degree relationship, it's going to go straight through this direction. Okay, straight through this way. Okay. Now that's our frontal plane. Okay, and so when we talk about the axis of the frontal plane, the axis running through this way is sagittal. So frontal plane, sagittal axis. Okay. When we look at the sagittal plane, doing flexion here in the sagittal plane, again, here's our plane, here is our axis. Okay, and this axis is actually going to be frontal. It's called the frontal axis. It's going to run straight through this joint. If you could put a pin through here that it could rotate around, there actually is a pin in there that it rotates around. That would be, again, sagittal plane moving around the frontal axis. And lastly, the transverse plane. This is a little harder to see here, and actually I have to use this side that I've drilled a hole in and attached with some rubber bands. Okay, and I apologize, I don't have like a zoom function on here. But this motion, okay, where we rotate or spin him around in that joint, is occurring in the transverse plane. Okay, so here's the plane. You can start to see how unsavvy I am with technology here. Here's the plane that we're moving in, okay? And this axis is then going to go straight through the bone, straight down through the joint, vertically, okay? Because the transverse plane is pretty much straight horizontal, okay? And it's going to rotate around the vertical axis, okay? So again, 3 cardinal planes, 3 axes associated with them. Those axes are always going to be in a perpendicular relationship to the plane. So anytime we have a frontal plane motion, it's going to occur around a sagittal axis. Anytime we have a sagittal plane motion, it's going to occur around a frontal axis. And anytime we have a transverse plane motion, it's going to occur around a vertical axis. So hopefully that maybe gives you a visual on the things that you're trying to see before. I hope if you had a great understanding, we didn't screw you up. But if you were having a little trouble with it or sticking on that point, hopefully this will make things a little clearer. Till next time.